Hello, and welcome to the Culture Beats podcast, featuring conversations about pop culture and many other aspects of life. I'm your host, Chris Bournea. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Robert Gaines, author of Scintilla, which he describes as a practical, psychology-driven guide for anyone who wants to generate business, product, or service ideas. Without further ado, here's our conversation. Well, Robert, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, of course. 8 years in the Army, and right at the end of my military career, I started my first business, which was a recording studio. And a couple of years later, I was at University of Louisville, where I got my bachelor's of business management. And strangest career pivot after that was an art gallery in 2008, and then very recently started a mastermind group and podcast, wrote the book. And so, yeah, I really got energized. But in the interim between that, I was in the insurance industry for a long time. I still technically am. They pulled me in on contracts. I was a fraud investigator, which is very exciting work. But during that time where I worked corporate, I put my entrepreneurial brain to sleep. And then about at the end of 2023, I got that hunger again to get back in. And I've been, gonzo ever since. And I'm so much happier doing this kind of stuff and sharing ideas because yeah, I missed it.
Sure. So that's kind of a big dichotomy between an art gallery and the insurance industry. How do those two things even intersect in the same
Sure.
career?
Sure. Well, even the recording studio and the gallery started almost exactly the same way. Because I'm not the world's worst artist, but I love hanging around artists because they have something I don't have. They have what I want. I wish I had that talent. So I've always surrounded myself with people like that, and they always complained. Initially, bands were complaining that they couldn't rent live gear and they couldn't get anybody to run sound. So I bought some live gear, got it together, and after my 10th gig of people pouring beer right into my monitors and all
Oh
my,
no.
just, yeah, it was bad. I said, I enjoy this, but, where the smoke, people are putting cigarettes out on my panels and stuff. I thought, how else can I do that? And that's what I thought. Okay, let me start a studio. Gallery was the same way. I was in the army, man. I was no art aficionado. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about it, but I was hanging around artists, and they said these galleries are ripping us off. Same thing the musicians were saying about the studios. Same thing. And I said, okay, what's a gallery? A gallery is some lights and some walls and a good marketing program, which it was. So I opened up a gallery in San Antonio. It did really good. It was during the housing crisis. It was hard to sell art during that time, but we
Sure.
did, considering I was a first time and didn't know anything about art, we did some really amazing stuff down there. And yeah, good memories about all of that.
Wow, the way you describe the owning the recording studio, I mean, it sounds like a cliche. It sounds like, oh, rock stars or musicians in general are known for trashing studios and trashing hotel rooms. You think, oh, that's just a cliche from like biopics or whatever, but
Yeah, yeah,
no, they
it's
were
no
actually like
cliche.
that.
The reason why I stopped the studio is somebody came in and stole everything.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, that was 98. I was really, if you talked to me 15 years ago, I was still sad about it. But look, that's not an industry where you grow old gracefully. So they
Yeah.
did me a favor. I wouldn't have said that in 98, but I realize now that, they did me a favor because, your ears go and a lot of other things. And a good studio needs to keep their ear to the street and know what's hot and what's not. And that's very, very difficult to do. But the big thing is, Chris, I got to do it.
Hmm.
And that was at that time, that was my dream to have a
Yeah.
studio. And I got to do it. You know how many men out there die with a dream in their heart? And I've gotten to do a couple of things wild that I wanted to do. So, hey, I'm grateful.
That's so cool. And it seems like you kind of got out before the music industry took a turn and everyone is doing recording on their either their laptop or their phone. So the age of the studio with the control booths and everything, it seems like that's kind of a not totally a thing of the past, but it seems like it's less common.
That's absolutely true. What's crazy is, the studio was 98, and by the year 2000, well, even in 98, there was a lot of piracy going on.
Right.
It was the beginning of the industry being destroyed
Yeah.
because as you know, the big record labels didn't understand this peer-to-peer, this
Yeah.
theft that was going on, and they responded to it too late, and then it was all over with. We thought naively that the internet and then later social media was going to democratize artistry because I love artists. I want to see them make money doing what they love to do. And even now with all this technology, it's still just a handful of people that make all the money. It's
Yeah.
and you can look at any industry. There's 5% YouTubers, podcasters, same thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
5% are making 95% of the money, and then there's everybody else. And I really naively thought that the internet or social media was going to even out the playing field. But and that's not a sad thing, by the way, Chris. That just goes to prove you better not get into something unless you're ready just to hit it harder than anybody else out there.
Right, right. And that's kind of your area of expertise now, right? Is identifying demographics and how you can kind of scale up an idea. Can you talk more
Right.
about
Well,
that in your book,
sure,
Scintilla?
sure. That's right. So how that came about, obviously part of that book was somewhat rooted in reverse engineering the businesses I had started because I
Uh-huh.
didn't just do those two businesses. I was involved in other businesses. Those were two that I totally, completely did alone. But there were other ones that I collaborated on. And then there were where I went and consulted for people. And I like to get that story about where did you come up with that idea? And for a lot of people, I mean, you think about Christopher Reeve, the guy that plays Superman,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying this to be sarcastic, but he didn't do any research and he had no concern about people with spinal problems until he fell off that horse and then he couldn't move from the neck down and then he became the face of a movement, helped generate a lot of money in that direction. So you'll see this line where there's this strong reason to cure this or to fix this and then they become entrepreneurs. Well, I really got inside of that on the book. So who my book is for is the old version of me a long time ago. You're trapped in a cubicle.
Hmm.
You don't know, you want to break free. You want to get your freedom somehow, and you just don't know what to start. You see people on social media doing this and that. You go through the book, and I explain both if you're the meditative yoga type, I, there's stuff in there for you. If you're more like me and you want to do searches and look at hard data and figure out what direction to go based on trending out, hey, we've got something for you there too. So through the end of that journey of that book, at the end, you should come through it with some ideas for products or services that will be viable, that you can start your own business.
Right.
The marketing is, even though I have a background in it, and of course I'm happy to talk about it. The book is mostly about coming up with the idea because I think there are other authors like Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, who are like there are already great books about marketing. So I tried to keep my book in my lane about seeing a good, knowing something good when you see it, and just to say something that's unique about the book for your audience. I think I'll just mention one of the two best things I think that somebody could invest their money in right now. One is property in a foreign country, which is
Hmm.
a whole other subject
Yeah.
because, there's nothing cheap here in the US. You're going to buy gold, you're going to buy silver, they're sky high. You can't go into the stock market because we all know it's in trouble and
Yeah.
CDs aren't paying any money. So what are you going to do with your money? You have to be careful with the foreign product, the foreign property. But the other thing that the book talks about is intellectual properties. What are all these bands doing now?
Hmm.
They're selling all their IP to the labels and to these different. Why are they doing that? Because this is a great opportunity. Now, I don't expect somebody to play and invest their money without them knowing what they're talking about. But I think right now, because people think that there's no money left in recording, or people think AI is going to stop the ability for authors to make money,
Yeah.
people are scared and they're selling their intellectual properties for dimes on the dollar. So even me and you and I could get together and we could buy a former New York Times bestseller and reprint it, do a new cover. I'm telling you, it's people would be shocked to know the prices of some of this stuff that's going for behind the scenes. And
Wow.
it can make you a lifetime of money because you make that book one time or you reproduce it one time and then you sell it. Like audiobooks, there's nothing to print, nothing to manufacture. You don't have to worry about if we get into it with China, that audiobook's going to just keep cranking out because there's no production cost as far as Amazon is concerned. So sorry for the rabbit hole, but I wanted to tie it all in.
No, no, because that kind of leads into what I was going to ask you about the creator mindset versus the editor mindset, because a lot of people can come up with ideas, but executing the idea or realizing, okay, this idea is viable, this one isn't. How do you, what's the process for that of determining what's a viable idea?
I would say at its most basic, because there's a lot of things that people want that say, I want the solution to this problem, but are they willing to pay for it? That's the biggest difference. And as far as viability, there has to be some proof out there that people are willing to exchange money. Now, how do you do that really quick? Well, as I mentioned in the book, you can create, and Jeff Walker didn't invent this, but he came up with it. He mentioned it in his book Launch, which is a great book about how to launch a business.
Hmm.
He says, start with your minimum viable product. So your idea doesn't have to be perfect. And I guarantee you, Chris, you've pivoted from the topics that you probably talked about when you first started your podcast, just like I
Yeah.
did. And every business I started, I always ended up in some different aspect in the end, different from what the conception was from the beginning. So I just say start with the idea,
Hmm.
get it out there, shop it around, try to sell the most minimally viable version of it. Don't, and I know people that went and got patents and had 5,000 of something made in China and then had a shipping container of it shipped over and then they found out nobody wanted it. You
Hmm.
don't have to do that. Get some prototypes out there. Do a Kickstarter. There's a lot of different ways. So I guess my answer to your question is it doesn't have to be perfect.
Okay.
Whether something is viable or not is really up to the buying public. It's hard to know.
Hmm.
Even an artist, even famous musicians, they'll tell you, we were in the studio, we thought this was going to be our big hit off this album, and nobody, radio stations wouldn't even play it.
Yeah.
And then the one song that that one song that almost didn't make it on the album ends up being the big hit. So
Yeah.
it's hard to know when you've got a hit.
So what do you think is the difference between being persistent and just not giving up on an idea that you think is viable, and being kind of foolish, and the old cliche about doing the same thing over and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, which I don't think is always the case. But like for example, I don't know if you've ever seen the Rick Beato YouTube channel where he
Yeah, he's a
yeah, he was
genius.
talking about the I don't remember the artist's name, the song that's really hot right now, Ordinary. That artist had posted that song on TikTok like 147 times before it took off and went viral. And the record label had told him, this is not a single, no one's going to be interested in this. And for some reason, he just had this feeling in his gut that if the right people just hear this song, it'll take off and become a hit. And now it's like it's huge. It's one of the few songs that me as a music fan could one of the few contemporary songs that I could actually name. So he obviously had a belief that despite the 146 unsuccessful times posting the song, that just not to give up on it. What is the turning point to know, okay, it's I've tried dozens of, if not hundreds of times, now it's time to give up, versus like the who was it, Edison, that supposedly did 10,000 experiments before he came up with the light bulb. How do you know when to keep going and when to give up and just say, okay, I tried this, it's not viable?
Well, and all of those, great question, by the way. And I've never been asked that, although I love the subject because to my knowledge, there's only two books about when to quit. And I've sought them out because people don't like talking. Look, I was in the army for 8 years. They didn't want you to quit on anything. You're on a
Yeah.
road march, don't sit down. You're running, don't ever stop. And unfortunately, I was raised in that. I was taught that in the home, and then I was taught that in the army. And so I tell you what happened. I'm not a big fan of college, by the way, even though I got that piece of paper. I'm not a fan. And if I had it to do over, I probably wouldn't have gone. I don't have a lot of regrets, but I will tell you the one moment where I felt like the professor hit me across the head, and I was in my 30s when they said it. They defined a phrase called commitment to escalation. I had never heard that before, didn't know what it was. And then they were saying it's when you're so involved in something and if you've already poured in so much time and resources, you just can't let it go, even though anybody, and here's the key part of the definition, even though everybody on the outside can't possibly see how that's viable. Um, and that's tied into sunk cost and a bunch of other, but that's one of the few things in business school where I was like, okay, because I had done that so many times because I was told to just hold on no matter what. And sometimes no just means no, not right now.
Hmm.
Look, and again, I like to make a comparison that we both deal with. I play around with the titles of my videos on my podcast.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to go back and play around with thumbnails. And I know it's a good episode. The guy was engaging and I know the value's there. So I keep doing enough iterations of it and maybe it'll find its audience. But for me, and the answer to your question is everything has a time burden, has a time cost. And for this young man, it worked out. But
Hmm.
I also know because I was in the business for not for very long, but I still have friends that are in the business. And there are guys, I'm telling you, they've been trying to get signed for 30 years, but they want to sing and play guitar. They're really good guitar players and they should never have their mouth near a microphone. And I'm telling you, and I'm sorry to say this, it's never going to happen for them
Mm.
because they can't sing. you know, and that's okay. I had artists come in that their art at their current level was never going to be on the wall, and that was hard. And I never said it that way to people. I was always nice, but yeah, sometimes you have to go back and just get better skills. So for me, when I'm making that decision, because I've abandoned a lot of projects, because after university, I learned don't get I don't care if I spent $6,000 on something 2 years ago. It was very painful because I thought it was going to solve a lot of problems and it didn't. And I could feel that my fingernails were holding on and I had to just let it go and say, you know what, that was a $6,000 lesson and don't ever give that guy money again. And yeah, so if you're, I think commitment to escalation is rooted in, it could be rooted in poor self-esteem
Mm.
because now I believe, I didn't believe back then when I was hanging on to everything, but I realize now I have enough confidence that either myself or the fellow members of the mastermind group, we can come up with another good idea.
Hmm.
You know, I don't feel like the guy that I only have one good song in me. I've got intelligent people around me now that I can pitch something, we can shape it, we can refine it. But the people on their own, they're the ones that have it the hardest. So they need peers and mentors around them, and that's going to just having a couple of other eyes and ears around you prevents so many problems. And inventors and a lot of entrepreneurs are loners by nature, and you've
Yeah.
got to team up with people. Man, that solves so many problems.
Yeah, for sure. How can you tell between someone's subjective opinion that this idea isn't good enough or you just don't you just can't sing and so many things, especially creativity, are subjective. How can you tell when you're getting feedback that is actually useful and not just an opinion that someone else may have a different opinion?
What I try to do is, and this is hard for a lot of people, it's hard for me for a long time,
Yeah.
um, is I try to think like the consumer of the product.
Okay.
And if their criticism or suggestion is valid in the through the eyes of the customer, then I might make some changes
Mhm.
because you and I both know as podcasters, we were at that point where we weren't getting many views and there wasn't a whole lot going on. People are really easy with their suggestions, even if they've never had a podcast before. So first I have to look at the person's background. Have they had a podcast?
Yeah.
And the people that I listen, my favorite people to listen to are the ones that are just one step further down the road. It's a guy, and I've never talked to a billionaire, but I don't think I could relate to them. They're so far down the road. Um, Yeah, they're like, just buy a yacht and you'll have fun. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I did ever, when I was young, I was at a party. I was probably in my early 20s, and a very wealthy woman, the classic string of pearls, she said to me, have you ever been to the south of France in the summer? And I'm like, no, and probably never will, and just there's different worlds out there. So I like to go to somebody who's just achieved it or achieved it last year. I take great value in the suggestions of that person
Hmm.
because they just went through it and the lessons are fresh in their mind. So, I mean, I do think there's value in talking to
Hmm.
an 80-year-old Wall Street veteran too.
Yeah.
But, but for the immediate development of a product or the immediate solution of a problem, I just need somebody who's just a little further down the line.
Yeah, and what you're saying sounds like the concept I've heard a lot about in the past few years of deliberate practice, is that the way you get better at something is to not just put in the whatever it's is 10,000 hours of practice to become fluent at something, because if you just blindly do practice something, you'll bake in bad habits if you don't get the right feedback. But getting advice from someone who, as you said, is just a little bit further from you, not someone who's a maestro who they could do this with their eyes closed, someone who actually, like you said, they're successful, but not so out of the stratosphere successful that they're not relatable.
And I'll share a trick with you, Chris, that I do to make that more effective. So I've had a lot of careers. Now, I don't know if I've ever said this during an interview, and I've wanted to say it several times. Have you ever gotten that printout from the Social Security Administration that
Yeah.
shows all every job you've had since you
Yes.
were 16? I think I have 34 or 36 jobs on
Wow.
there. And I'm not even close to exaggerating. I
Wow.
could probably name 20 of them, but we don't have time. Um, so I've done a lot of different things. But there's a trick that I learned when I go into something new, just like when I went into podcasting. I grabbed a bunch of books about podcasting. I grabbed a bunch of books about interviewing. I grabbed a bunch of books about asking questions. So
Hmm.
anytime and I'll tell you very quickly the story behind the book, why I decided to write it is I got into a situation where a friend he needed to come up with a bunch of different product ideas. He was basically creating a miniature version of Amazon. And he thought naively, and he hadn't done his research, that he was just going to get a bunch of cheap stuff from China and compete against Amazon on a small level. I'm oversimplifying it, but
Yeah.
and then he found out he'd have to order a ship full of that product to even get a low enough price to make a margin. So he came to me. He goes, "Do you think we can come up with some stuff from scratch?" And I said, I mean, we could do merch. I said, we could get shirts. And I said, but from the ground up, are you kidding me? He says, yeah, can you? Because he was paying me. So I said, I'll look into it. So I immediately went to go grab books about how to come up with product ideas. Chris, there weren't any. And that's when I went, oh,
Wow.
that's the idea. And unfortunately, I had to go to him and say, look, we can't wheelhouse this and build this from scratch. I don't have the intellectual firepower and there's nothing out there, but I'm going to take a couple of months off from this project and I'm going to write this book because I had enough, again, to reverse engineer what I had done before to figure out how I did that. And then the rest of the book came from research. And I apologize. I probably didn't answer the question.
No, you are. Yeah.
Okay. I got lost.
Yeah, an entrepreneur that I follow is Tom Bilyeu, who was involved in starting Quest and
That's right.
sold it for like however many millions. And a concept that well, I bring him up because he said that when they first started selling Quest bars, he got the target audience wrong. He thought it would be bodybuilders, but it turns out it was like an everyday average person who just wants a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Bodybuilders aren't really interested. They have a very specific, fit, nutrition regimen that they follow. And I've even heard like a documentarian named Keith Otwad who said that his first documentary, it was about uh, athletes who are over 60. And he thought that his target audience would be other athletes who are over 60. And it turns out it was like the actual target audience was administrators at organizations like AARP and people who work at like agencies that serve older people. But it took trial and error in both these cases for these people to to find out who their target audience was, and their hypothesis was totally off the mark at first. So how do you find out who your ideal customer is, or your demographics,
Sure,
if
we're
you think
talking
you have a
about
good guess and it turns out to be totally wrong?
we're talking about finding the tribe, right? Because
Yes, yeah.
if you believe in the product, if something tastes good, I mean, if something tastes good, I'll buy it. You can email me, send me some free samples, because I like Tom's products. I think he sold the company off and he did
Yeah.
very well. And I've enjoyed some of his interviews too. And as I go into that, I wanted to go back because I forgot. I now remember the point I
Oh,
was trying to make. Why I read so many books when I go into something new.
mhm.
The reason why I read so many books before I go into something, particularly if I don't know much about it, is only so that I can learn the language of that industry. So when I was in the Army, we had all these acronyms and I learned the language of being in the military. I could be in a grocery store now and I can hear a guy talking and I can tell he was a Marine or Army because we have a special way of speaking. And that's true with nurses. That's true with, so I buy the books, I read the book, listen to the books through audio so that I can learn the language that when I do find that mentor, I already speak their language. I don't know what they know, but I know how to ask the questions to find out, which goes right back to how do you find your tribe? You have to speak the language of your target market. And it's very hard if your product is aimed towards 80-year-old people and you're 25.
Yeah.
This is where, just like podcasting is spreading seeds. Our goal is when we're a guest on somebody else's podcast is that somebody in their audience will become either a buyer of our product or they'll also become a member of our audience. With a product, if you're out on enough platforms, and
Hmm.
I know some people that are like, Robert, I will never put my book on TikTok because that's some Chinese, and then they got some crazy conspiracy theory or whatever.
Right, right.
Let
They
me
think
tell
it's
you,
only like Generation Z who's on TikTok or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, they don't know or they don't want to learn something
Yeah.
new or
Yeah.
whatever. I'm telling you, book talk, as they call it, is a massive
Yeah.
force in book sales, and
Yeah.
it's hard to convince somebody my age or older
Yeah.
to get involved in that. So if you want to find if you have a product and you want to find your tribe, I mean, if it's, we're not talking about advertising dollars. We're talking about organic that costs you nothing other than your time. But
Yeah.
if you're spreading the seeds around a whole lot, and the beautiful thing, Chris, well, again, I can only speak for myself. My first business, I couldn't pull data. I can tell you how many people in Australia listened to my podcast yesterday.
Yeah.
We live in this amazing era where we can look at the data. So the answer to your question is spread your product or service in as many platforms that are trackable and traceable as possible and see what pops. And when something starts to pop, you lean into it. And same thing with us playing around with our thumbnails on YouTube, more contrast, more make the text bigger. It's a constant iteration. And again, this is, the perfection is the enemy of so many good things in our lives. We've got a jewel and we're constantly filing the edge. And at the end, after enough time, we have a diamond, or after we've put in so much time, we need to throw that out and start something new. And there's no shame in that.
Right. Something about you talked about the upside of being able to pull data, but something that I've heard a lot of, especially creative people, talk about is like what's frustrating is the constantly moving goalpost. Like, for example, a lot of authors, put keywords in their descriptions of their books on Amazon, but then the algorithm changes and the keywords that you used 6 months ago are obsolete. So you constantly have to update. You talked about like tweaking the thumbnails and of your podcast, and so it's not just a case of, okay, I found my tribe, my target audience, and here's the one way that I can reach them. It's like you have to keep revising and revisiting and updating, or else you your you and your products will become out of date. Is that accurate?
That's where so I dislike the fact that it's true, but it is true.
Right.
It's grow or die.
Uh-huh.
It's not hold the road, stay in the middle of the road. You will get destroyed. Um, and that's no different than nations on Earth. What's the news obsessed with? The Orishi Russian missile can go, so everything, even our podcasting gear. We're all in a war, better camera, better microphone, better lights. I started powdering my face so I don't, my face don't remember. I mean, it's ridiculous. But if you don't, the price is very high.
Yeah.
You're going to spend all that money on marketing and everything running an office and doing all this staff and then just sit there hoping you can ride out to retirement on cruise control. This planet, like it or not, and again, it's terrible that it is the way it is. We live in a dog eat dog, Darwinian, evolutionary, the people with the power make the decisions type thing. And if you're not 100% committed to something, you probably should just go back to the 99 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not an insult. I sometimes think that entrepreneurship to some degree is a character flaw. Because think of it, if civilization were all like us, it'd be scary.
Yeah.
It would be scary, and I still sometimes get called in on contracts where I'm working a 9 to 5, and there's no shame in it. And I have a deep, abiding love for the tradesmen, the plumbers, the
Hmm.
mechanics, they keep this whole thing together. And I'll tell you, they've never had it better than now because so few people want to turn a wrench or put a bead of weld down. So if you're seeing this and you're trying to decide if you want to influence your son to be an entrepreneur or a welder, he can do a little bit of both. But I again, if I had it to do over, I would definitely have had some more trade school training in my background. So no
Right.
shame on that.
How do you decide when to bring in someone to help you? For example, bringing in someone who is an expert in social media advertising, like how to place Facebook ads. How do you know that that person is going to be effective and you're not just throwing money down the drain, paying them to do something that you could train yourself to do?
Great question. Okay, so um, I would have answered this differently 2 years ago. But where all this started for me is when I read Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. The book came out in, I think, October of 2023. I read it a month later. It changed everything. I immediately hired a VA because I had been trying to do everything myself. Um, I have some problems with the platform, but I use Upwork all the time. And sometimes I'll do a contract for work where I'll request, hey, do you know about this? And I'm not trying to do this on purpose, but I'm at first trying to hire someone.
Yeah.
And then based on the conversations I'm having with these people, checking their background, explaining my problem. This is before I signed the contract with them. Through all of these multiple conversations, I'm able to make an intelligent decision whether you know what, I should just do this myself,
Okay.
or it's worth because when we get down to talking to them about the money, that's where I have to make the decision. Am I going to learn this? Because at 54, to be honest, I really don't want to learn too many
Yeah.
new things, you know. But Dan Martell says, um, and I agree with him that I should be engaging only in things that either I have very high degree of expertise in or the thing that causes the highest amount of profit in what I'm trying to do. And I believe, but look, I realize not everybody can go on Upwork and hire somebody, but there are people overseas and even here in the Western Hemisphere. I have some wonderful friends in Nicaragua, and there's some virtual assistants that are very happy to get $5 an hour. I mean, that's
Hmm. Hmm.
that's good money for them, and they're
Yeah.
good people, and they work very, very hard. But yes, I would say um, get somebody involved early, even if you're just going to contract with them for a couple of hours to look at this problem. But
Mhm.
if something's out of your wheelhouse, unless you've got a lot of time or you have if you have a lot of time and you don't have a lot of money, you're just going to have to learn that skill.
Right. Right.
But if you can afford it, and I'll tell you, it's just like this is a author copy, but um, that cover that's $400 worth of work, the cover.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know if I'll ever make make that money, but on top of everything I spent on that book, to be quite honest with you and your audience, I don't know if I'll ever recover that. I get 60% off Amazon, but it's a calling card for me.
Yeah.
That book does a lot of things far beyond me trying to recover the investment in that book that are going to make money in other ways. But I know people. My whole thing was I'm going to put 6 months in this, and I see these guys doing these homemade covers. No, I'm paying somebody.
Yeah.
I just did my audio book. I ran a studio, Chris. Did
Hmm.
I edit my own stuff? No, I paid an expert. That that's all they do is they edit audio books. Now, could I have done it? Yeah. I wouldn't have done it as good, and it would have taken twice as long. She did it in 2 days, and she's a
Wow.
beast. And I paid her $200 and tipped her, and I was happy. And that was another one on Upwork. So yeah, sorry, I didn't plan to keep answering all of these with such long answers.
No,
So
no, it's great information. Is it okay to ask someone for like a work sample or say, okay, let's do something for a trial period just to see how it works out?
Sure. I posted today, Chris. I want a new logo for my podcast.
Hmm.
I think it's decent, but it needs a refresh. So what I said in the ad, and this was just posted a couple of hours ago on Upwork, I said if you want to do a mock-up as an application to this job with a watermark on it so that I can't use it. I want to protect their IP. I said that's going to give you, I openly said that's going to give you a better chance than me looking through somebody's resume.
Right.
Do the work. Do a light iteration. I'm not saying I want you to work for free, but I can tell pretty quickly if I can work with this person or not. So I do ask for quite a bit up front because I'm generally very generous with the money, and I'm a good tipper. I think a lot of people on Upwork probably don't tip at all,
Yeah.
but because of that, I've done 43 as of today. I've done 43 contracts on Upwork, and my rating out of 5 is a 4.99.
Wow.
So I believe in paying people, communicating, and being good to people. But I'm not saying I was even capable of doing that when I was 35. So, I'm very much a work in progress. But I think Upwork is good. Hire people, look at the work they have. And the great thing about Upwork versus just getting somebody off of Facebook Marketplace, they have ratings. They have their portfolio up there. It's a great resource. Again, I have some issues with Upwork. They're trying to run that company with chatbots
Oh,
and but the Upworkers themselves are great. It's just the platform is a little off.
right. So if you're an entrepreneur or some kind of artist who's just getting started in putting your products and services out there, how do you, I mean, you mentioned Upwork, but should you try to get referrals to someone who can, design your book cover? Or, I mean, you mentioned the process of kind of deciding if someone is right to do the work that you need
Mhm.
done. But if you're just starting out and you've been working a 9 to 5 your whole career and you don't know even where to begin in finding people who can help you get your idea out there, should you try to get referrals from other entrepreneurs or other artists? Like, where do you even start?
Sure. If we're talking about a book, and I'm going to be
Yeah.
very frank, if you write a book and you don't have the money to put a good cover on there, set the book away until you've got the money to do. Because I'm telling you, the great and I'll give you an example. Just today, I listened to a sample of an audiobook, and it had a very famous guy in the intro giving credibility to this writer, saying how great he was. And I thought, oh man, this is gonna because I really respected the guy that gave the acknowledgement. And then the book started, and it's that AI virtual voice, which
Okay.
which Audible. And then I looked at the reviews, 3.7. I won't normally buy a book that's 3.7. My time is valuable. I'm listening to the 4.6 and better.
Yeah.
And this guy got an endorse. Can you imagine if you're into basketball and you get Shaq's endorsement
Yeah.
and you worked hard and you wrote this book, and then you're going to have a robot read it to people? So my answer to that is wait until you can do it right. Because I guarantee you put your book up there. Look what happened to this guy. And he had a famous endorsement. He dropped it. He dropped the ball. And that book's not selling. And if you're already unknown and Shaq's not behind you, and you put an ugly title on your book, I'll guarantee I know what's going to happen. You're not going to sell a single copy. So yeah, just it's okay to wait until you've got more money. It's okay to wait until you're ready. There's no shame in it. Or find somebody
Mhm.
um, because I invest in intellectual properties. Reach out to me. I'll look at your manuscript. If it's really good, I'll pay for your cover. We're going to do some kind of deal, like like
Yeah.
Shark Tank,
Uh-huh.
but there are people like me that'll fund it. I love artists, and there are a lot of writers out there, much better than me that haven't put out their masterpiece yet. So yeah, reach out, ask for help. And I've every interview I've been on, I tell people reach out to me. LinkedIn, I'm easy to find. I answer every message. Don't wait until become a billionaire because then I won't be answering emails. Now's a good time to get me.
Yeah, before you have your assistant and the assistant's assistant whose
That's
job it
right.
is to keep people from bugging you.
Yeah. And honestly, I hope I'm always able to answer because that's the fun part for me.
Yeah.
I like having a book and my face on. That's cool.
Hmm.
But man, being a part of something greater than yourself, like when I was in the, and I'll tell you, I've said this before, my favorite job I've ever had was I was a cook, not a chef. I was a cook
Mm.
in the back of a very fine restaurant because what we were putting out was some of the best food in that city. And those customers never even saw my face. But the fact that we were in this team producing plates that you could put them in the Smithsonian, I still think about that job. I mean, we were doing amazing work and people didn't even know who we were, but we knew what we were doing. So yeah, find that too in your life. Help somebody else, be a part of something greater than yourself. It gives you so much more joy.
Yeah, you talked about, kind of joked about all the different jobs you've had, but do you kind of feel like all, if not, or some, if not all of the jobs kind of prepared you for what you're doing now with and made you able to write Scintilla and
I'll tell you where it really shined. And I felt ashamed for a long time, but because people in my personal circle were helping me feel ashamed. Like family. Mom's worried about you. I get it. I did have this internal North Star where I knew I was going to be okay because I'd already done crazy things and I had survived.
mm,
So I knew I was going to be okay. But on the outside, yeah, it was very scary to a lot of people what I was doing. But where it really, really shined is when I became a fraud investigator
mm,
because I grew up in my dad's body shop. He worked on cars. We grew up in relative poverty. So I kind of knew that. And all these jobs, I had worked through all of these trades. I had seen the logistics side, the management side. I worked at a courier company. And so when we started investigating fraud, they were working, they'd bring me something they had worked, their best people had worked on it for 2.5 months. And I'm like, oh, and I would just get, it's like a movie. I was like, oh, well, just call this. This is, and they were like, there's no way you could know that. And I said, well, I know you can't call those guys on a Friday because that's the worst possible day to get a hold. They're like, how do you know? I said, well, that's the day everybody goes to pick up their car.
yeah,
And so it was a mix of a lot of experience and a fairly good memory. If I have anything, the memory, I've got that going for me. But that varied experience absolutely helped me. I can look at I'm not looking at a problem with a pair of eyes. I'm looking at it with 14 pairs of eyes. I
mm,
can think and man, yeah, so I'm grateful I had all of that experience. And if somebody's listening to this or watching this and they're that kid or that guy that's been through 20 jobs, go get 20 more
mhm,
because you'll event. Now you got to keep trying because in addition to working, I also had my entrepreneurial things that I was trying to do. So you have to keep the lights on, keep working those different jobs. And I did some couch surfing too, where I would I'd stay on somebody's couch and
yeah.
yeah, just you will hit your stride if you're not doing drugs. Or drinking every night, and you've got a good personal circle of entrepreneurs. You, I'm telling you, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said earlier about the audio book that you decided not to listen to because of the AI voice. Do you
Mhm.
feel like AI has any kind of role in idea generation? I mean, there are people who just go overboard and just, okay, chat GPT, what are 7 ideas for a profitable business that I can do remotely? Or can you use it to like help analyze the data you collect about your target audience? Or is there any role for AI, or should you just kind of do everything yourself so you're not, letting your brain get lazy relying on AI to do everything?
This is a jerk. I'll give you a very jerk answer to that question. Did you see the movie Limitless, where the guy took the drugs and then he knew
Yes, that
everything?
was with Yeah, Bradley Cooper.
But yeah, great.
Yeah.
I love that movie. There's a scene where he only runs into the guy that gives him the drugs two times. One when he gives it the drug the first time, and the second time he runs into him right before the guy dies. And there's a toss away line that really caught my attention. He said it works better if you're already smart. And
Okay.
um, because I spend a lot of time thinking about thinking and that investigative fraud mind, I can get things out of AI that are really, really good. But I also argue with AI and I catch AI lying to me, not intentionally, but it's sometimes it'll just do a quick little search and what it comes back is a bunch of opinion based stuff and I'll question it like I would during a fraud investigation. I'd say, where did you get that information? Oh, I got it from. I said, well, where's the data for that? And it'll go, oh, and you can, it's like when a person gets caught not knowing what they're talking about.
Right.
And so I'll ask questions about like ginkgo biloba, it's supposed to give you a
Okay.
good memory. And I'll say, does ginkgo biloba? It says, yeah, there's some evidence. I said, well, what's the peer reviewed evidence of the efficacy? I said, give me the dosage and how big was the trial? And then AI's like, oh, gotcha. It's full of it. So AI works, but you've got to ask it really good questions. And I'll say, as a writer, I've not seen anything that I keep hearing writes really great stuff. But Chris,
Mhm.
I've not been able to get AI to produce anything that I would buy, and I've not seen AI produce anything with anybody else that I would buy. So I don't have to worry about it. It fools AI writing can fool people who don't read books.
Yeah.
But if you're avid, you're not going to fool. No, you're not going to write a business book and fool somebody who went to Harvard. Not that I did, but AI can't fool somebody at Harvard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a tool.
Yeah,
That's
and I'm a journalist in my day job, and I feel like, as you said, it's a tool. Like I use it to transcribe interviews that I've recorded because that saves me hours of having to like listen to the interview and keep typing, word for word what the person said, or I dictate ideas into my, phone. I send an email to myself and use the so I feel like there's functions of AI that can help make your job easier, but it
mhm.
shouldn't replace the your brain power. I've heard it
Sure.
described as like it should be used as a calculator, not doing the work for you.
I think that's very accurate. I've recently started using it to help me with questions for the interviews because I normally do a lot of research on the guests, probably too much, to almost to scary. Because they're giving me their gift of their
Yeah.
time, so the best thing I could do is be prepared. And but I did start to lean on AI, particularly now that I've hooked up with Podmatch, which has been a great resource.
Yeah.
But these people have these, but the guests that I struggle with the most are the ones like me that have had a widely varied background. So I throw everything to ChatGPT and I'll say, look, give me 10 questions, and
Yeah.
five of them will suck and the other five I'll have to change them to a certain degree. But I'll tell you, as a writer, what I really enjoy that AI can catch mistakes better than the way, let's say, Grammarly does.
Yes.
And I don't know if you would agree with this, but sometimes if, let's say, you as a journalist or me writing a chapter, I might have two completely disparate ideas that I definitely want in the same piece, whether it be a
Hmm.
chapter or an article.
Hmm.
And I have trouble because I'm a fledgling writer. I'm only about an hour and a year into this journey, and I never wrote that much before. It can help me build a bridge paragraph to put those two, and I'm not capable of that. And I won't use what AI gave me because it's crappy, but it gives me the idea of the string that I can use to connect these two paragraphs. So that I think it really shines there. Now, how do you use it more for your like day to day for journalism?
Yeah, I guess it's how you define AI because I define AI as anything that's like a digital tool, not necessarily something that's branded AI like Chat
Oh,
GPT
okay.
or Claude or Copilot or whatever. So to me, a thesaurus is an online thesaurus is AI. Just today, I was writing a
Oh,
story
yeah.
and I said, what's another word for hone? I've used the word hone more than once in this story, and this the thesaurus said sharpen. So my human brain wouldn't have come up with the word sharpen, but I didn't let the thesaurus write my whole story. It couldn't. Yeah, I would never use AI to like write an entire story. But what do you think about using AI to as like a VA, a virtual intern? Like for example, if you can't afford to hire a VA, even people who work for very reasonable rates, as you said, to come up with drafts of social media posts. If you weren't going to write that yourself anyway, you were going to farm that out. What's the difference between hiring a VA and using AI to do it?
Social media in since you gave me that as a constraint,
Uh-huh.
that's difficult because I believe so I'm from the school of Gary Vaynerchuk, which is and I'm not posting as much as I should, but and I don't like the word authentic or authenticity because I hear it 20 times a day. It's like synergy, hearing the synergy in the 1980s. I break out in hives when I hear that. But
Yeah.
people are look at the podcast. They're interested in the personal stories. AI can't do that. That's why, AI had I don't listen to country music, but it had some song that a lot of people thought, oh, that's really, really good. And I said, yeah, okay. Give me a blues song about a guy and a breakup and the guy had his heart ripped out. And because when we listen to music like that, or Miles Davis, where that's a phrase, that's a feeling coming through that trumpet. AI can't do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we know the story of the artist and we connect with that story. Oh, Mariah Carey lived in her car, or
Right. Uh-huh.
so, and AI can't produce that.
Yeah.
So for social media posts, I really try to put my own, it's not always about me, but sometimes I'm telling stories about other people.
Yeah.
AI can't cook that up. I have to talk about the lady who risked it all to open up a little restaurant down the street and she's struggling and she was crying at my table yesterday, which is all true. That did just happen. AI can't put that in there. So for social media posts, it's tough. It can give me ideas to riff on.
Hmm.
So I think it can be influential, but more directly to your previous question about it being a VA, I have the paid account for ChatGPT, and boy, do I wish it could be full VA, like call somebody
Hmm.
or email, because I have tried to get it to do certain things, and it's very powerful. And I will say, since I really started understanding ChatGPT 5.2 in the last 4 or 5 months, I think my productivity has probably doubled. And one way I can tell, because I'm already writing a follow-up book to Scintilla. This is more about making human connections, networking, and I'm using LinkedIn as a vehicle to drive the narrative.
Hmm.
I'm writing at almost 4 times the speed that this first book was. One, because now I've got a little bit more experience as a writer, not like you, but I'm about ready to take my training wheels off, maybe. But I know how to use ChatGPT for the research and the ideas, and so yeah, ChatGPT and AI has been a great help, but it's not a crutch. I'm not going to lean on it. The ideas still have to come from my life experiences or good research that I've vetted.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a slippery slope because, like for example, I like to write song lyrics as kind of a hobby, but I'm not a musician, so I can't write a melody. I'm trying to learn to play the guitar, but I mean that's something that takes years to master if I had the time to put into it. So, what if I actually took song lyrics that I wrote, that came out of my human brain, and put that into one of these AI songwriting apps and said, okay, give me a R&B song with these lyrics that I wrote, and then I take that song that AI generated from my lyrics and took it to a musician friend and said, "This is the demo tape. I didn't write the melody. AI wrote the melody, but this is the vein of the song that I would like to have created from my lyrics. Can you work with this?" Rather than me trying to like hum a melody that I might hear in my head. So that's how I,
Sh- Sure. Well, look in the 1980s, my generation,
yeah,
they were
my
taking, yeah, they would take beats from songs. That's no different. So I wouldn't look down on you as a creator, as
yeah.
a musician, if you did that to start to build the structure of the song because that's what they did in the 80s. They would go get that album from the 1960s and they would sample that 3 seconds of bass
Yeah.
because it was just, you know, funk, Parliament Funkadelic and all that. And thankfully it gave some of those bands a second life later on down the road. So I don't know how that impact is going to be with AI, but yeah, I would say to use that as a sketch of your idea and then have somebody who really can play bass. Get yourself a Bootsy Collins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm a huge Prince fan, so I always use him
Oh,
as an
yeah,
example. He used drum machines and synthesizers, but he also played 27 instruments.
that's right.
So his drummers and percussionists, when he toured, they would have to trigger the Lindrum sound, but
The
they were also
Lindrum.
playing live to like bolster the sound. So it was a combination of, machine and human working alongside each other.
Yeah, he was definitely one of a kind. And
Yeah,
and when musicians pass away, I didn't know him. I had never been to his concerts, but he was one of the few musicians. When he died, it bothered me.
yeah,
I think I was yeah, I think I was very sad about it for several days because I grew up on 1999 and then
yes,
later got into his older stuff.
uh-huh,
And that period after Around the World in a Day, I
yeah,
kind of couldn't connect with that as well because I was, I mean, a guy from Kentucky, so the
kind of
you know,
avant-garde kind of music. Yeah,
yeah, the 1999 and that stuff. But I started getting some of the bootlegs that are coming out now that have extended solos and
yeah,
alternate ending. Oh man, where he goes way far out because Warner Brothers was holding back some of his genius
yeah,
because they just wanted hit after hit after hit after hit,
right,
and we
right.
we know what he went through for that. But some of his more offbeat alternate versions of songs, I think now are displaying just how incredible his genius was. I
Mhm.
mean, just it's hard to quantify how great of a musician he was. I mean, just the sheer number of songs he produced alone was. Sorry, you got me
No,
on a
no,
topic.
I'm the one who brought it up. And I think part of the reason why it's not just our age or whatever that music today seems so artificial is because there
Mhm.
are no constraints. It's like when you have the constraint of you only have 24 tracks, tape is going to
Yes,
run out. It's like having those built-in constraints kind of puts parameters on your creativity and in a good way. So I think even though the amount of songs you could record now is limitless. The amount of songs you could put on an album is limitless because it's streaming. It doesn't have to be on a physical compact disc or vinyl. Um, not having any constraints sometimes can be a bad thing.
absolutely. Arguably some of the greatest music ever done was late 60s, early 70s,
Yeah,
and that was all four track. That's all
yeah,
they had was four track. Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, all of that stuff. That was four track. To think that they were just ping ponging and bouncing tracks. I mean, it's just, but think about, let's pull that into to business, right?
yeah.
So how do you make Led Zeppelin 4 and why is it so great? What did they have to do? They had to do a lot of rehearsal
Hmm.
and they had to do a lot of planning
Yeah,
because they only got one shot
yeah,
at a lot of that. And same thing with business. So it's like what we were saying, iterations and coming up with a prototype, and then you're shaping that and reshaping it and reprinting it and fashioning it and putting it out to this market and changing the thumbnail and changing the description. All of that is very much what needs to be done now. And I will say, because AI is starting to make people so lazy, and
oh
it
yeah,
might be a generational thing too. I think right now, I'd be so bold to say in 2026, it's never been easier to stand out um, because everybody else is kind of on cruise control, on
oh yeah,
automatic.
yeah,
So I think it's a little, in some ways, it's easier. There's a lot more noise, but it's also easier to break out.
yeah. If you were a prodigious talent, someone like a Prince, and you came out with very original music, I mean, you would definitely stand out from all the auto-tuned crap that's on streaming and what's left of the radio
And
industry.
I I haven't heard too many musicians in the last couple of years that really wow me out. And in my advanced age, I'm now getting into a lot of jazz fusion. I was never into that when I was
Yeah,
younger,
yeah,
but I think now that I have a deeper understanding of music and a deeper respect for the musicality, these jazz fusion guys, and I mean, I'm sure if you played that stuff to the 18-year-old version of me, I'd run out of there. But what those drummers can do, what the bass, I mean, the time signature I mean, it's
yeah,
magic, man. I'm just
yeah,
stunned with what those jazz cats can do. It's unreal.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Robert, it's been fascinating talking to you. I'm sure we could just go down a million rabbit holes, but I want to be respectful of your time. So,
Yeah,
how can
thank you
people
so
reach
much.
out to you? You mentioned LinkedIn. What are,
Yeah, LinkedIn is best. Of course, they can come to the podcast as well. I'm mostly a YouTube guy, free
Mhm.
time mastermind, but I'm Robert Gaines on LinkedIn. I've got a unlike some people, I got a fairly current picture, so I look like myself on there. And if you guys, if you want links, of course, all of that is on my Podmatch account too. Feel free to put my links on there. And if they want the book Scintilla, it's available as any flavor you want. I got it as a Kindle, paperback, hardback. You want the audiobook that's narrated by myself as well. And I would encourage you to get the book. And then the people that do, they're going to get a heck of a discount on this second book that should be out hopefully by April of next year.
awesome,
Or this
awesome.
year, April of this year. Sorry, it's already next year.
I know, I know. It's like hard to believe we're more than halfway through the decade already.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Robert, thanks again. I look forward to reading Scintilla, and yeah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
If you like this video, please leave a comment, share it, and subscribe to my channel.